In February 2021, the power grid in Texas failed during a winter storm. Millions of people lost heating for days. Pipes burst, water stopped running, and some people froze to death inside their own homes. It became national news because it felt impossible. This doesn't happen in a modern country with modern infrastructure. But for humans living through Ice Age winters, losing heat wasn't a freak disaster. It was a problem they had to solve every single winter. No thermostat, no insulated walls, no emergency shelters, no news alerts, no rescue trucks. Just you, whatever you were wearing, and a fire that had to survive as long as you did. And if that fire went out, you might not get it back. Let's go back roughly 20,000 years to the coldest point of what scientists call the last glacial maximum. Ice sheets buried huge parts of what's now Canada, northern Europe, and Siberia. Average temperatures in many regions sat far below anything most of us have experienced, even during that Texas storm. Humans evolved in Africa. We have no fur, no blubber, no built-in defense against cold like that. Every single thing that kept a person alive through an Ice Age winter had to be built, hunted, or taken from another animal's body. And some of those solutions sound less like survival and more like something out of a horror movie. The first one, wearing the dead. Human skin offered almost no protection against the extreme cold they were facing. So early humans turned to someone else's. We don't have many surviving Ice Age garments themselves. What we have instead is the evidence of how they were made. Hide-working tools, awls, and needles found at sites across Europe and Asia. That evidence points clearly to animal hides being worked into clothing, and archaeological findings show bear hides specifically being used for hundreds of thousands of years. Think about what that actually meant. To get a bear hide, you had to kill, or scavenge from, one of the most dangerous animals in your environment. Then skin it, cure it, and sleep inside it. Your survival depended on wrapping yourself in the exact kind of creature that could have ended you first. For most of this period, that hide was just draped over the body. Loose, crude, barely fitted. It kept you alive. It didn't keep you comfortable, and comfort wasn't the goal, because in weather this extreme, exposed skin doesn't just get uncomfortable, it dies. Frostbite would have been constant. Blackened fingers, lost toes, no hospitals, no antibiotics, no way to fix a mistake. Then, somewhere around 30,000 to 40,000 years ago, something tiny changed everything. The sewing needle. A small tool, carved from bone or ivory, thin enough to pass thread through. For the first time, people could actually sew clothing that fit the body instead of just covering it. Multiple layers, trapped heat, blocked wind. It's the ancient equivalent of someone inventing the first real winter jacket after generations of people just wrapping themselves in blankets. That needle probably let human groups survive in places they physically couldn't have lived in before. But it still came at a cost. Every coat, every glove, every layer meant another animal had died, and someone had spent hours working a hide by hand, in the cold, with stone tools. Next, the shelters. In a lot of Ice Age landscapes, especially on the open plains of what's now Ukraine and Russia, there wasn't always wood for building or caves for cover. So people built with the only large material available to them, bones, specifically mammoth bones. At a site called Mezhyrich in Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered structures built almost entirely from mammoth skulls, ribs, tusks, and leg bones, dating back roughly 15,000 years. These weren't random piles of bone. They were deliberately engineered, layered with hides, and packed earth to block wind and hold in warmth. People were building their homes out of skeletons. Picture that during a modern blackout, when your house is already cold and dark for one night, and it feels unbearable. Now picture your entire home being the bones of an animal that once weighed several tons, with snow piling against the walls and the wind trying to get in. But the fire was the real crisis point, the thing that mattered more than the shelter itself. There's evidence of controlled fire use going back at least 400,000 years, but actually creating fire from nothing is a completely different skill, and for most of human history, a lot of people probably couldn't do it reliably. If your fire went out, you might not be able to start another one. So groups carried embers, Smoldering coals wrapped in leaves or packed inside a material called tinder fungus that could hold a spark for hours, basically a biological lighter. We know how seriously people took this because of Ötzi, the frozen man discovered in the Alps in 1991, dated to roughly 5,300 years ago. He was carrying a full fire-starting kit in his belt pouch: tinder fungus, flint, iron pyrite for striking sparks, and backup plant material. Even that late in human history, losing your fire was serious enough that people carried dedicated equipment just to prevent it. During a storm, keeping that fire alive might have been one person's entire job for hours. Feeding it, shielding it, moving it deeper into shelter. Losing it wasn't an inconvenience. It could be fatal for the whole group. Now here's where it gets stranger. At a site in Spain called Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, researchers studying ancient human bone samples found something odd: seasonal patterns in bone growth that some scientists have argued could reflect a slowdown in the body's activity and metabolism during the harshest stretches of winter, something closer to a hibernation-like state. Not true hibernation like a bear. The idea remains genuinely controversial, and plenty of researchers reject it. But the fact that this is even a serious debate in the field tells you something about how extreme Ice Age winters may have pushed the human body. And not everyone made it through. Our closest relatives, the Neanderthals, had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting specifically to cold European climates. In a lot of ways, they were built better for this than we were. And yet, by around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared. Climate instability, shrinking food, competition for resources. Researchers still argue about the exact combination of causes. But the outcome is not up for debate. One branch of the human family made it through these winters. The other didn't. So how did anyone actually survive conditions that erased an entire other species of human? Not with one clever invention, with cooperation. Archaeologists have found tools, ornaments, and raw materials hundreds of miles from where they originated, which means groups were staying connected across huge distances, even in the harshest environments on Earth. Those connections meant shared information, shared resources, and sometimes literally surviving because another group helped you when your own supplies ran out. In a world this hostile, being generous wasn't just kindness. It was a survival strategy, maybe the most important one humans ever developed. Put it all together, and Ice Age winter survival wasn't really a story of clever invention. It was desperation, dressed up as ingenuity, wearing the skin of dangerous animals because your own body offered no protection, building homes from the bones of giants because nothing else was available, possibly forcing the human body into a state we still don't fully understand, watching an entire other species vanish into the same cold you were trying to survive. So the next time the power flickers during a storm, or you're annoyed that your heating takes 10 minutes to kick in, remember what that same weather used to demand. Your ancestors wore the dead, slept inside skeletons, kept a single ember alive through the night like their lives depended on it, because they did, and watched their closest relatives disappear in the same conditions they were fighting to survive. You're not warm tonight because humans perfectly adapted to the cold. You're warm because, winter after winter, for tens of thousands of years, they simply refused to lose.